You're listening to We Ain't Dying for This, a Black woman's guide to liberation, and I'm your host, Crystle Johnson. We are a community of Black women demanding our collective liberation through radically soft living. Each week, we share the stories of Black women who have set themselves free from the expectations of others and are living on their own terms.
Hey, everybody. We're live, Chloe.
Hey.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of We Ain't Dying for This, a Black woman's guide to liberation. As I shared last week, we're going to be talking about parenting as liberation this week. And I founded We Ain't Dying for This, a Black woman's guide to liberation, because Black women are literally dying from the stress that we're under and being everyone for everybody. So I created this show to really give a peek into the many ways that all of us can experience liberation. My name is Crystle Johnson. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the founder and retreat host at Design Your Soft Life. So as everyone is listening, as always, drop into the chat if you are hashtag team live or if you are hashtag team replay. And if there's a Black woman that you believe might benefit from this conversation, please feel free to go ahead and share that with her and engage with us in the chat. We really would love to hear from you in the chat. I'm going to pass to Chloe in a second to introduce herself. However, while we're doing that, we were talking about parenting as liberation. And as we were sitting in the green room before this conversation, we were talking about all the things that as children, we said, I would never do that to my kids. Or when I'm a parent, I would do X, Y, and Z. So if you're listening, we would love to hear from you. And when you were a kid, what were the kinds of things that you would say to your parents or behind their back? Because, you know, most of
the conferences.
Exactly. What were you saying behind their back when they did something that maybe it was like a tiny thing that maybe you blew out of proportion, or maybe over time you learned it was a really big thing, it was really serious. And if you feel comfortable, please share in the chat some of those things that you would say behind your parents' back. I just want to say hi to Taryn and to Dan, who are in the chat. So Chloe, tell the people who you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Crystle. My name is Chloe. I am a mom, an educator, an entrepreneur. I'm now a mom to 3. As Dan mentioned in the chat, I had a baby 9 months ago. And so my kids are 7 as of last week, 2.5, and 9 months old. I am a community leader, an organizer, a collaborator, and I mostly work with entrepreneurs in the creative space to define their brand, marketing strategy, and as a graphic designer. So got a lot of hats, a lot of things I'm juggling all the time. But one of the things that takes precedence over pretty much everything is being a parent, and really kind of influences the way that I interact and engage in everything else in my life.
Thank you, Chloe. And for anyone who is looking for a graphic designer, someone to support you with marketing, Chloe is a genius. She is a genius.
I told you about that word.
Listen, girl.
You're gonna make me change my pricing structure. You keep throwing that around.
You should. As you should. You should definitely be charging more than you do charge for your services. I can say that even for myself, in communicating with you about my business, I've gotten more clear about how it is that I want to move forward. It's almost like you hear all the jumble that's in my head, and then you're like, girl, I think this is what you're saying. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. And that's so hard to come by because a lot of folks, they already have their own idea of what it is that they would do if they were you. And I just feel like you do a lot of intentional listening in order to get to the root of what it is that your clients need. So thank you for being a rock for me. And
thank you.
Yes.
I will say, I mean, honestly, if I could jump in, like the listening element, the reason why I'm so well practiced at it is probably because I'm a parent. And even before becoming a parent, like as an educator, that was always something that um, took like priority for me. It was like, I'm not the like end all be all, know it all in this room.
Yeah.
Students have like lived experiences that are valuable. They know things that are valuable. And like it was that open exchange of ideas. And that can really only be fostered through like very intentional listening. Um, so as soon as I get my kids to listen, it's over.
Yeah, 100%. And I think to your point and to Dan's point in the chat, he said that you're the real deal when it comes to equity and listening and being
Thanks,
humble
Dan.
is part of that as well. Like you have to be able to hear what people are saying, understand the value that they're bringing in order for you to reach the best outcome. So kudos to you. I think you're amazing. And the story.
Thank you.
Good story. So I'm going to actually pose this question to you because we talked about a couple of stories from your childhood where there were things that happened that you were just kind of like, oh, I would never do this, or you've kind of shifted it around in terms of how it is that you approach your kids. So what's one example that you would use growing up where behind your back, you were like, behind your parents' back, you were like, shh, 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 shh.
Yeah, so first I'll say is that I'm one of four. So anything that I say here, I should not be the only person held responsible for it. If my mom will feel away later on. So sorry, mom. Sorry, not sorry. But one of the things that, jumps out is that I always say like our parents, they gifted us with like these communication skills, right? Like they challenged us to answer questions thoughtfully, to question things, but not them. And like, kind of gave us the skills that we needed to engage with the world. But then there would be times where it was like, all right, now you've gone too far. And I'm like, oh, I've gone too far. Like I'm just tapping in. And so like one thing that comes to mind is my mom actually made me come up with like a code word. Um, so that she could tell me when I was being like too forward, too spicy, like too something. And so she was like, I want a word, something that you hate. And I was like, oh, I'm not allowed to hate stuff because you always say we're not allowed to say we hate things. And so she'd be like, all right, something you strongly dislike. And my word was eggplant. Oh no, sorry, I'm confusing two different strategies she had. So my word was mushroom. And I don't like mushrooms. The texture freaks me out. But let's not talk about the fact that it's fungus. It grows in places that like we just no, thank you. So my word was mushroom. And anytime I was like getting to like let's like think of like your like standard preteen that like talks back or like wants to challenge authority, she would be like mushroom, and that was like the end of the conversation. It was like if you continue past this point, like it's over for you. And I remember thinking to myself after a while of like shorty would just say mushroom when like she was done with me, and how in a way like that felt like very dismissive. And so what I learned to do to avoid the mushroom cap on the conversation would be like soften the energy that I was coming with. But like internally, that just kind of bred this sort of like, I want to say the word resentment comes to mind. Like I always have to take the edge off of how I feel about something. And that I carry with me through this to this day.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, I want to tell Crystle that I'm so frustrated with this thing, but I'm like, no, it's really not that bad, Crystle. Like it could be worse. And I'm like inside, I'm seething. Like I do think that kind of trickled down from an experience like that. And I remember I used to be like telling my sister, like, yo, I was talking to mom about this, and she was like mushroom, and that was it. I had to leave the room, like, and we would be like, and so I do think that one of the things that I've tried now is like even when my kid is crossing my oldest, you've heard him in action. He's very confident and articulate, and he will read you for filth. He has no like. Sometimes I'm like, why is there like a 45-year-old just like angsty auntie trapped inside of my 7-year-old boy? Like I don't get it. Today I said, can you please throw this in the garbage for me? He said, sometimes I wonder why I feel like a butler in this house. What? And I'm just like, huh? And I think in most like Black and Latinx households, that would be like immediate grounds for like not clipped. Like, but in our household, I'm like, why are you saying that I'm treating you like a butler? Like, I'm asking you to throw something out. You ask
Yeah.
me a million times a day, you know? So I'm just trying to keep the conversations flowing versus being like, I'm done with you. Goodbye.
Yeah, I feel you. And I think that we don't really understand sometimes, well, today, like as adults, I don't think that until recently, when people have been talking more about childhood and how childhood impacts how it is that you show up as an adult, that people have really been thinking about situations like that, where it's like, hey, like we got a word. And, you know, luckily you got a word, because there's some people who have different situations and different things that will happen where it's like, shut it. Like you
Yeah.
need to say anything else. But the point is that you were stopped from talking or stopped from
Hmm.
sharing. Or when you did share something, like you knew there was a consequence to that.
Right.
So as we grow up into adults and we get into the workplace and we are in friendships and relationships, that really does impact the way that we show up with people, because we're afraid of the consequence
Yeah.
of going too far. And whatever
Yeah.
that consequence might be, even if that consequence is this person is going to talk to me for a few days, or maybe they're going to stop being my friend, they're going to break up with me, whatever the case is, you know, like we're afraid of what could potentially happen. And I think it just kind of like puts us in these unhealthy cycles until we figure
Hmm.
out why. Like, why is it that I'm that way? And
Yep.
I know you actually took the saboteurs test. I don't know if you remember what your saboteurs
Oh, yeah.
were, and
Um,
actually connect back to how it is that you show up.
so my saboteurs are people pleasing, perfectionism, and overthinking. Is that one of them?
See, I don't have that either in mind. I
Oh,
don't.
I don't. Yeah, me either. My 9-month-old always triggers it. I don't. I'm like, why are there's hearts flying on the screen all of a sudden? But yeah, those are. I believe those were my three. And to be honest, I took it at such an unhealthy point in my life that I really took those as like, this is through and through what's got to be my problem because I took the assessment at a point where like just everything was going wrong. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I was very open and like honest. I try to be when I'm taking like, you know, the Myers-Briggs or like the Enneagram. Um, but when I saw the three, I was like, okay, and what? Like, of course I knew all those things. Like that's why I'm in the shit I'm in right now. Um, but yeah, those I personally, I'll say this. I studied psychology, and I was an educator for 10 years. So when it comes to thinking about like especially how childhood experiences like influence our development into adults, I got
Mhm.
more practice than like your average Joe. And it's something that I'm so passionate about that every single day as a parent is a struggle because I'm torn between like what I know and what I experience and like
Mhm.
how I know it could influence the next generation. And I think of it as that's why this is like the opportunity, right? To change, not to change the narrative, because as you said, like my childhood could have been different if my parents were different people. Like we had our own bag of shit that we went through, but it's not a childhood that I'm like, oh, I regret this or like I wish that didn't happen. Like it was a good childhood for lack of a better word. And although there were times where it was like, yeah, you're gonna get popped in the head or in the mouth or whatever, like I never felt like I was in danger. And that is something for kids I know is not always like a
Mhm.
reality. Um, and so, as much as my mother might try to twist my words right now,
Okay.
I'm not saying anything crazy, but there were certain things that, you know, it's not for me, it's not about like changing the narrative as much as it is like starting a whole new sort of like story chapter situation. Like my husband and I, when we first found out we were pregnant with our oldest, we had all these conversations about like before this baby comes into the world, like, here are all the things that we need to make sure we're on the same page about. And one of them, for example, was like, how are we going to discipline this kid? Because you talk crazy, I talk crazy. Like, what are we going to do? And we were both pretty much on the same page about almost all of it. And I think we're watching that play out in real time now as our 7-year-old comes into his own like personality and is like more comfortable speaking out about things. And I never lived through a day where he wasn't comfortable, which sometimes I'm like, damn, I empowered this kid too much. Gotta dial it back a little bit. But at the same time, I'm like, I wish I had that confidence that he has.
Yeah.
So it could be such a double-edged sword sometimes. But that's kind of where my head goes. It's not so much like what I would do differently. It's just what I am doing differently because I'm a different person.
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like it's liberating for you, because I think a lot of people feel like they don't have a choice. Like, I don't have a choice. This is like what I'm going to do because I don't have a choice. And I feel like when we think about the ways that we are connected to liberation and the ways that we're chasing liberation, I think it's important to acknowledge that we have the ability to make the choice about how it is that we want to move forward or not move forward. So I'm so glad to like hear again how liberating that is for you. And even for me, like, I don't have children, and you and I were talking about this, and I think my reason for not having children is that I appreciate my freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also do think about my childhood, and you could have never gotten me to say anything bad about my childhood until I started learning more about childhood trauma and the ways that things that have happened in your childhood that cause you to show up the way that you do. So I know that for me, like, as someone who is adopted, like, I have some trauma around abandonment. And I also understand that I continue to achieve in my family because in the back of my head, I'm like, well, they're going to send me back. Like, do I get to stay? Like, so I'm just overachieving all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
And then even just the fact that my parents worked a lot. They worked a lot. They were never around really.
Yeah.
So times where they were around, or the times where I did like hear that, oh my goodness, great job, etc., was when I was achieving something.
Yeah.
So what I learned throughout my life is that I'm worthy when I'm achieving. And it feels good to be able to debunk that as an adult, to be like, no, I'm inherently worthy. And I don't need to achieve anything or do something for somebody in order for me to be worthy. I don't have to do anything in order for me to receive unconditional love from someone. Like,
Yeah.
so that has been a turning point and like really liberating for me.
At first, I just want to say, like, if I could hug little baby Crystle, because I mean, I think even as like a kid to a kid, that was such a big part for me. It was like understanding my friends' like family dynamics. Like my best friends growing up, I was the only one whose parents were divorced, for example. And then I had a friend whose father passed away when she was like relatively young. And so it was just her and her mom. And like just being aware of their family dynamics, like it kind of always made me self-conscious about ours because I still had that same thing where like my parents, we were latchkey kids, like we got home from school, it was like, do your homework, lock the door, don't mess with nothing. Like, I'll tell you this funny story. One time I called the police by accident,
Oh,
dialing
shit.
my mom's phone number. Her area code was like 914, and I pressed 911.
Mm-hmm.
And so, long story short, the police showed up at our front door and our mother showed up at the back door and was like, "Why the fuck are the police at the front door?" And I was like, "I was trying to call your cell phone." And I had to be like 7 or 8. And I remember just thinking, like, they're going to get rid of me. Like, I'm going back to wherever I came from. Another side note, my siblings convinced me that I was adopted.
Yeah.
And I actually believe them.
It's just so many people that their siblings will be so evil and say, you were adopted. Like, you really aren't ours. Can't you tell the difference between you and them? You and us.
I used to be like, but we look alike. And they'd be like, nah, bro, like that's why they took you because, you know, you look like us. So they figured you wouldn't be able to know, but we know. And I was the middle child, so I was like, I believe them because they're both saying it. And,
Yeah.
we won't go into that. That's not what this is about. But, I remember thinking like there were so many little moments that kind of popped that same thought in my head. And I felt like I had to like overcompensate for those times when I was just being a kid. Um, and actually, I'm still growing out of that. I think like this period of unemployment has been so difficult because I feel like I don't have anything to measure my like success against right now. Like I'm not like crossing shit off my to-do list at work or like getting a paycheck. Everyone's like, "Where are you taking care of your baby? Like that's so exciting and so fulfilling." And I'm like, she can't pay me. So I'm like, she's cute. I love spending all day with her. It would be
Yes.
better if you give me like a performance review at least. And they're not gonna do, Cole will jokingly be like, "You're the best mom ever," when he's like buttering me up for his 18th peanut butter and jelly sandwich of the day. And I'm like, I'll take it. Like, I'll take the little I can get right now. But it really is hard to overcome that, like, that mentality of like, I need the validation from an authority figure or like an outside source. And so, one of the things that I learned, this was not something that's inherent. So, I always like flag any parenting advice with like, this is what works for us or has worked
Yeah.
for us. Um, and I'll say this, and I hope every parent who watches this agrees or at least admits it to themselves, like nobody knows what they're doing.
Yes.
This is like the one thing you have no clue. We talked about like you felt like you don't want kids from however long ago. Like it's one of those things that I said to you, like you don't know you don't want to do it until you're in it. And by that point, it's too late. So I'm like, anybody who's sitting with no kids and it's like, I can't wait to be a parent, like, slow your roll and wait till it happens. And then, embrace it as it comes. But all that to say, one of the things that I read one day when I was like, how do you make sure your kid doesn't have this complex of like, only my parents can give me approval, is instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," you ask them like, "Are you proud? How do you feel about this accomplishment that you've had?" And it's hard to like reprogram your language. Like there are so many times that I want to be like, "Oh, thank you, you did something, like high five, that was awesome," and then I have to like switch my brain into like empowerment mode and be like, "How do you feel about that thing you just accomplished?"
Mhm.
And sometimes he's like, like, and I'm like, all right, well, he feels like, so it's something that I'm hoping we'll have more practice with, like as he gets older and as he's accomplishing things that are a little more challenging. Because right now the max of his challenge is like, I beat this level in Luigi's Mansion 3 that I've been trying to beat all day, and I'm like, great, turn that shit off and go clean your room. Like, I have to constantly like dial it back. Otherwise I'll be like the soft parent. And we're trying really hard to like maintain a balance of
Yeah.
like, I don't know, disciplinarian is a weird word, but we gotta have a mixture of both. So
Yeah. Yeah. Something you just said triggered me a little bit. And it's not because of you. It's like
my bad.
advice that you gave is perfect. I think it's perfect. I think you should ask children, like when they are looking to you for validation, you should ask them how they feel about it. As an adult, that does not feel good.
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm talking to someone and I'm like, hey, like, how do you feel about X, Y, and Z? Try to use that language on me. I'm going to feel like you don't like it or like there is a problem with it. And obviously, like, that's some work that I need to do. But I know that there are other people who agree with that as well. And if you're listening live or listening on replay, let us know if you agree with that language, like the language that Chloe shared, asking you back to validate yourself, that as an adult, does it feel good or does it feel bad? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'll add the caveat, like as an adult who was parented by like people of, let's say, the past, or like as my son says, in the 90s, I'm like,
The
why are you
1900s.
saying it like that? The other day he was like, what is that from, like the 1900s? And Craig and I just looked at each other like, you don't even know what year it is right now. How are you coming for us? But I think that's, first of all, if somebody's asked me the same exact way, like, what do you think about it? I'd be like, oh no, why don't you want to tell me your thoughts? So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
And then my hope is that as we shift the language, like the culture will shift too, where like I'm almost practicing it on myself, I'll say, where if I share, like I've shared things with you where I'm like, I'm really happy about this, or like, I love these parts. Here's where I'm unsure. What do you think? And then kick it to you for like feedback. And you're like, I love it. And I'm like, all right, great. She just ignored all those things I said I wasn't sure about. Perfect. Love that. But that's kind of where I say I'm practicing it, because without a doubt, if I was in like a one-to-one with my boss or something, and they were like, what do you, every single time my boss would be like, give me a win. I'd be like, I worked all 5 days this week. And she'd be like, the fuck? Like, no, give me a win. And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And so that was something that we were always working on, is like being okay with taking ownership of those accomplishments is not something that I was ever like taught how to do or like encouraged to do,
Yeah.
really. And so I still don't know how to do it. Like, I'll be in a meeting for a one-to-one, give me a win. I don't know. The house didn't burn down this week, so we're good. Like, I genuinely am so uncomfortable with doing that. So I'm just trying to like help my kids be in a better space as adults. And, maybe they'll be telling their therapist about me in 10 years, maybe not, but TBD.
Yeah. Well, just know that your community is always here to tell you just how great you are, just like we did at the top of
I
the
was gonna say, I took that. I'm like, I'm gonna play it back tomorrow morning when I gotta start my stuff, so I can be in the right mindset. Like, they hype me up, I'm good, I got it.
like
But
you're a winner, Chloe.
thank you. Yeah, you're
And
gonna.
to that point, I need you to show the people the shirt that you have on right now.
Oh,
Chloe is a line of affirmation shirts with
yeah,
different words on them. So today she has on growing, but
yeah.
there are others. What are the others? Like, I think you
The
have
others,
creating.
yeah, healing, creating, and blooming are the other like colorful styles like this. And then the like neutrals and the OGs that are embroidered instead of screen printed are manifesting, affirming, and thriving. Um, and I don't know. I mean, this is like, I build this kind of stuff because it's what I need. Like, I remember the manifesting sweatshirt. I was just messing around and I'm like, I really want a sweatshirt that says that I'm like manifesting stuff. So when I look in the mirror, I'd be like, all right, we're manifesting, and just like go about my business. And so that's really what this like these clothes, like these apparel lines that I've come up with, like the affirmation deck that I have, like all this stuff was built because I was like, what do I need? And it just happened to resonate with people, which is always great. But it's not easy. I don't know if my sibling is watching this, but they are like the ultimate plug your business person, and will be like, hello, I wanted to introduce you to my sister who does XYZ. And I'm like my face just immediately turns red. And I'm like, why are you like this, bro? Like, why? And then I remember, I'm like, oh yeah, they're the middle child. So they have like that confidence of like, y'all got me, I'm good, you're good. And I'm like the one carrying all the older sibling burdens of like, how embarrassing. Like, you don't have no home training. So sometimes we get into arguments, but I'll be like, all right, thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, I think we need people like that in our lives. And to the point of
Definitely.
which sibling you are. So although I'm adopted, I actually know my biological mother. So in my biological family, I am the middle child. In my adoptive family, I'm the baby. So it's the
Ah,
are
what a confusing position.
yes. So I have like traits of both, but I always laugh when I think about the middle child because have you seen those videos on TikTok?
Well, of course, I'm a middle child. Of course, I did it.
But you saw it where it was
Yeah, I've
like
seen a bunch.
the middle child, and then they like cut it off.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. They just don't let them talk. So a disclaimer: I'm the middle child of all of us, but I'm
Mhm.
the oldest of like my parents' kids. I
Yeah.
have an older brother who has a different father than us, but like we all grew up together in the same house all the time. So it's weird to think of it as like I'm the oldest, but once my parents were divorced and it was like, all right, like we have to go see dad. It was always like on me for some reason. Like there's
Yeah.
so many like layers to it, but I'm also both my parents are Virgos and I'm a Virgo.
Mhm.
And I'm also what they say, according to them, is that I'm most like them and I'm most like the other one.
Mhm.
So there was just like a lot of complexities, like when they were getting divorced and things that I would be like, these people are driving me crazy. And to this day, like as an adult, I'm like, I decided, and this was very recently, I was like, I'm not going to be like not like, I feel like some people would say like an outlet or like
Mhm.
I'm an energy absorber. Like if you have bad energy, come to me and I'll clean it for you. Like I'm like a filter for it. I decided recently, or my therapist decided for me, and then she told me that I was done with that. Um,
You are.
and
You
yeah,
are.
it's done because realistically, what was happening is like I thought of myself as like I'm taking your bad energy and I'm like kicking good energy out to you, but the bad energy was like staying trapped inside of me. And sometimes, like, as the person that I am in like our birth order and even just in my family, I was like, okay, I'm okay with like shouldering this burden until now I have my own tiny people to regulate and take care of. And I'm like, I don't have time to absorb their feelings and your feelings and have my own feeling. Like it's too much. So it took a while and it took kind of like some big moments for me to be like, no, if it's not about them three and my husband, because he's the one that helps me with them three, it's
Mhm.
not happening. Like it's just not priority or, and it's hard. It can feel like very similar to what you were saying about like not wanting kids. Like people think of it as selfish, but it's like if I told you the same scenario from a perspective of like somebody else is trying to take my time or energy away from them, you would be mad.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to remember that logic when it feels like I'm putting myself in a position that I have to like either justify why. That's another thing that comes from being like where we are in the birth order is like I feel like I have to justify everything when really I just want to be like it's none of your fucking business. Sorry if anyone's kids are around. We swear a lot and we have a pact that we will never get mad at our kids for swearing as long as it's in the right context and it's not at us. So that was our compromise. I'm like, we're not going to be able to stop cursing. And so it's just a thing. Our Cole, the oldest, when he was like 4, my mom told him to say thank you to a cashier at Target who spoke Spanish. And she was like, tell her thank you in Spanish. And he says, coño, which actually means the F word.
Oh no.
And she was just like, and then called me on FaceTime as she was walking out. She's like, why does your son think that means thank you? And I'm like, he don't think that means thank you. He don't even know how to say thank you. I'm like, so sure enough, the only Spanish word that my 4-year-old knew was a curse. And I was like, sorry. um, now he knows a few more, but he's still every now and then is like, I'm like, you're not allowed to say that. He's like, but you say it. I'm like, I'm an adult. I can do what I want. So I mean, this stuff is not for the faint of heart. I will say that you have to like be so steadfast and like care about stuff that you might not actually even care about. Like
100%.
that's the hardest one for me. I'm like, I'm chill, but I can't be so chill that you don't have any manners or like common sense because I had way too many kids in my classes over the 10 years that did not have any common sense. And I'll be like, damn, somebody's been thinking for you. Like your brain is for decoration.
Oh.
Um, oh yeah, Miss SJ got the. I always tell my students, I'll be like, listen, if I drag you, it's with love. Just know that. And if it's not with love, I won't bother saying it.
Yeah. Oh my
So
goodness. Ooh. Well, I just want to say that it was so good having this conversation with you and really like talking through the ways in which liberation shows up for you through parenting. And I hope that for anyone who's listening, like you're starting to catch on if you've been watching all of the episodes, like all of the different ways that you can experience liberation. through different parts of your life or through different things that are happening in your life. Because I think that we often have this one way idea, like this binary idea, I guess is what I want to say, of what liberation is. It's either you have it or you don't. And this is what it looks like when you have it, and this is what it looks like when you don't, which isn't actually true. I believe that it's on a spectrum, and that sometimes you feel liberated and sometimes you don't. It's a journey.
Definitely. I'll say just to like one, thank you for having me in the space. And two, that's what I've taken away from all of the past episodes and even your posts and things is that it's that ebb and flow. And it's even like it's all about like a shifting of your perspective, which I think like can change over the course of time. It could change from like 1 minute to the next. It could change for between days. And that's kind of where I'm learning to embrace the idea of liberation is like sometimes in order to feel liberated in one aspect, you have to like shift it a little. Like until we're like in an anti-capitalist, post-capitalism society, like you got to shift it. So I'm like, I'm all right with be feeling locked down in some other places, but one of the places that I'm hoping to maintain this like level of liberation that you've helped me reach is like in my personal identity and as it pertains to like my family and just being in this space.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Of course. Well, if you're listening, please follow Chloe. If you're not following me, follow me as well. And again, we'd love to hear from you in the chat if you're Team Replay with hashtag Team Replay. And then Chloe, where can people find you online if they want to work with you from a marketing perspective or even grab one of your manifestation shirts? And we'll also drop the link inside of the chat.
Stop plugging my products, Crystle. So you can find me in a few different places. I'm on pretty much all platforms at Barrio Press. That's BARRIO Press, and I'll drop it in the links as well. And I took my Instagram down while I kind of like collect myself mentally for a couple of days. So you won't see it now, but it's up there. And then my website is the same thing, .co. And you can find the sweatshirts, the manifesting kits, all that stuff at bodyopress.co. And then there's a link there to my bigger website, which is where any like consulting freelance work would come from. So there's a few different spots. I'll type them all out, all pretty and cute, and make sure that they're accessible because that's the biggest thing is for me is just like connecting and collaborating with folks. So find me.
Yeah, and you can find Chloe and I in Colombia this summer from August 11th through August 15th for the Experience Cartagena. So if you would like to join us, please visit designyoursoftlife.com/retreats to learn more. Reach out to me if you have any questions via DM. But until next time, we'll see you next Thursday for another topic. We're not sure what the topic, or I'm not sure what the topic
I was like, we.
I'm not sure what the topic is going to be next week, but we will meet you here next week with my good sis, Kristen Smiley, and we are deciding what the topic is going to be. So stay tuned and y'all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.